D. Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Adam Finnegan, David James, intern Emily here with you today. Derek Mason on vacation for the next couple of days as he prepares for his induction into the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame this weekend. Willie, you were just showing me your son Mahoney in the stands at the Home Run Derby last night. How was his experience in Atlanta?
I haven't had it. It got done fairly late last night. In my mind, that event still needs to be about 45 to 50 minutes shorter.
How long did it take?
Well, if you count the introductions and the hype, they had, for example, Pat McAfee did kind of a wrestling style, which you would appreciate. Introduction of all 8 of the players. They're standing on these big things in the middle of the field for effect. So they say 7 o'clock to start it. The actual first swing that counts is probably more like 7:20, 7:25. And it got done at about 10, I think. I think it was a 4-hour presentation. 4-hour. Is that right? Did I get that right, or 3? Maybe it just seems like 4. Either way, I still think it drags a little bit, but it was very good. My son Mahoney went down there. He drove to Atlanta with his buddy. They found tickets online. Pretty reasonable price. I would say the price dropped because there wasn't a lot of hype among the 8 players. Like if you're not a pretty hardcore baseball fan, you'd be hard pressed to name 2 of the 8 that participated last night. Fair?
I know that Cal Raleigh won and that his nickname is the Big Dumper.
The Big Dumper. And
great nickname.
I would say going into the season, I would bet you very few people knew who Cal Raleigh was.
Myself included.
But he had 38 home runs in the first half, the most a catcher has ever had before the All-Star break. Now, remember, the All-Star break is a little later than it used to be, so you got an extra week. Still, 38 homers is amazing, and he did win it. It was a good event. I watched it more because Mahoney was there, and he has got an unbelievable knack for getting on camera. He and his buddy, they were doing a one of those promo things, sponsored by this, and they're just doing crowd shots, and sure enough, there they are. He starts getting texts from his friends. I didn't see it live. I was watching. I overlooked it. He said, "Dad, they just said I'm getting texts. I was on. Go back and look." And sure enough, we found it. It's 2 or 3 good hard seconds. His buddy almost caught a fly ball. Their seats that they bought were in foul territory, way away at the top, and they were like, "Of course we're moving down. We're not staying up here. We've got no chance." So he went into the masses. And if you notice, there's some fights for those home run balls. Like everybody's got a glove. There's aggressive play. There's slots like in front of that chop house. There's like a walkway. People are like running through that walkway and leaping on each other. So I don't know if there were injuries last night, but his buddy got a glove on one of the balls and did not come up with it.
How old is your son?
He is going to be a sophomore in college, so he is about to turn 20.
Okay. What is the age cutoff for fighting over a home run ball?
There apparently was none last night because I saw some older guys going hardcore. It wasn't like, hey, give the ball to a kid. Last night, it was not that. It was a free-for-all.
One texter says,
I think a regular season game and the home run derby are probably different categories.
One texter on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHundy.com, says, "I swear, you all want to shorten everything. The home run derby was plenty long. It does not need to be shortened."
That was the sentiment that Mahoney gave me. I was like, hey, I wish it was a little bit shorter. It just kind of drags on
it's
TV.
Different when you're in person.
He says, we loved it. The in-game experience was, I don't like NFL football games. I feel like drag more when you're there. The TV timeouts, you're just sitting on your hands going, what is going on? Come on, let's get the game going. Whereas at home, you get up, you check your phone, you walk into the other room, you grab something to eat, you talk to somebody. You got your other screen, you got your computer in front of you, or you switch to the red zone. There's all kinds of things you do to kill the time. But when you're at the game, it seems to drag. So I felt I've never been to a home run derby. It would have been really monotonous to me, but they had a great time. So my favorite part is tonight, the actual All-Star game, but I'm becoming a dinosaur apparently.
Because you think it's crazy that Jacob Mizorowski is going to be in the All-Star game after playing in 5 games?
He's going to pitch tonight, so there'll be a lot of hype when he goes in there. I don't like that he's on the team, but I would watch no matter what. That's me. I'm the guy that no matter what you do to the game, I'm stupid enough to keep watching and hoping that I see a great All-Star game tonight.
Meanwhile, also in Atlanta, SEC Media Days roll on. Of course, Chase and Big Joe are still there. They'll be on from noon to 3 today. It is Texas Day, Auburn Day, Georgia Day, and Tennessee Day at SEC Media Days. By the way, our SEC Media Days coverage is sponsored by Brewhouse South. Experience Nashville's ultimate sports and brew hangout at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs. But Willie, yesterday we had proof once again that SEC Media Days are fertile ground for rumor mongering. Because yesterday, Greg McElroy, co-host of a radio show with Cole Kubelik,
who was an excellent guest for Joe and Big Joe and Chase yesterday.
Indeed, he was. McElroy and Kubelik host a radio show in Birmingham, Alabama. And as many of you know, Greg McElroy played for Nick Saban at Alabama. And yesterday on their program, I believe during a weekly chat with Paul Feinbaum, who, by the way, was on Robbie and Rexroad earlier today. Excellent interview, excellent story by Joe Rexroad on Paul Feinbaum at The Athletic. If you want to see what Paul Feinbaum looks like with hair, I suggest you read Joe Rexroad's story.
It's good. It's going to take you a while. So, grab a cup of coffee, budget a little bit of time. I didn't budget enough this morning. Got to be here, a little before 9:00 now. This is thrown off my schedule. Adam.
Yes, it is.
I didn't get to delve into my morning reading like I normally do. So sorry about that, Joe. I've only read about half the article.
Greg McElroy, I love the way he phrased this. He said a, quote, very much in the know person that I have a lot of respect for and have spent a lot of time around and just really, really admire. That person told Greg McElroy that they don't think Nick Saban is done coaching. Now, here's what happens. Someone like Greg McElroy, who has a big profile in SEC media circles, not only is he a co-host of a popular program in Birmingham, he's on SEC Network. You hear that, someone who played for Nick Saban, you hear that, and it spreads like wildfire all around the hotel in Atlanta. So much so that coaches who were speaking yesterday were asked about it, including Lane Kiffin. Here is what Lane Kiffin had to say about the prospect of Nick Saban returning to coaching.
I wouldn't be surprised. I kind of always thought that was going to happen. I kind of thought it happened after 1 year. But and I say that just because even seeing recent stuff with him and talking to him on the phone, at first I have no knowledge that he's coming back. I don't think anybody does that. I just, he's so sharp still. I almost feel like it's a waste that he's not. No disrespect to the media and what you guys do, but his ability to coach players and change lives in that, and he's so good at it. I just think he'll be back, whether that's NFL or college.
May I just say, first of all, that Lane Kiffin always has an excellent tan. Always has an excellent tan. He comes to SEC Media Days. He's got the shirt unbuttoned a little bit, clearly just off the fishing boat or something like that. Just always an excellent tan for Lane Kiffin. But
I would say, too, the thing that I have grown to appreciate about Kiffin, I do think he's matured and he has found a good niche of being interesting without kind of being unlikable. I thought his early years, he pulled out all the stops. He tried too hard. He was, I think, a little reckless. Saban probably deserve some credit for teaching him some things. But since he's come to Ole Miss, I just couldn't stand him for the longest time. he's likable now. I like hearing him talk. He comes in, he understands what SEC Media Day can be about. He knew what he was saying there was going to get some attention. I heard him give a different version of that same answer on SEC Network in more of a setting. That's the interesting part about these little quotes, harmless thing. And Paul Feinbaum on Robbie and Rex Road explained the exact origin of how it evolved, the original quote. But it is a great, perfect example of what happens when you have all these hours of airtime and space to fill and how things get twisted around. It is a really compelling thought. Is Nick Saban ever going to contemplate coming back to coach?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, Willie, but wasn't part of the reason Nick Saban retired because of the new landscape of college sports?
Yes.
We saw this a lot in college basketball. Jay Wright, Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jim Larrañaga, they all stepped away because college wasn't what they were used to anymore. And I don't think they wanted to take on the challenge of the new name, image, and likeness world of college sports. So why would that change for Nick Saban? This isn't Bill Belichick, who was effectively fired by the New England Patriots, couldn't get a job in the NFL, and went back to college. Clearly, he wasn't done coaching. So do I actually believe that Nick Saban would return to coaching? No. I think Paul Feinbaum said on the interview he had with Greg McElroy on the Birmingham station, he's in his mid-70s. He's playing golf every day at the best golf courses in Florida. Why would you give that up? He's got a great cushy gig on College Game Day, making a lot of money. Why would you give all of that up to get back into coaching in a world that you seemed to want to leave when you decided to retire? But as I said, this is what the SEC Media Days ecosphere produces. Someone like Greg McElroy says something, someone who knows Nick Saban, and apparently knows someone very much in the know, who he admires, who he trusts, who thinks that Nick Saban's going to come back to coaching. And it spreads to the point that Lane Kiffin, during his news conference at SEC Media Days, gets asked about it.
Who also knows Nick Saban very, very well. I think it's a long shot that it happens. Kiffin, when I was just happened to be watching the coverage yesterday afternoon, again, in a time slot that I'm not used to watching, 2 o'clock, 1:30 or whatever it was, when we're usually on the air. He said he would think it would be in the NFL if he would do it, take another shot in the NFL. At his age, the realistic slot for that, it's hard to see. And I agree with you that the big question would be, okay, you're willing now to play in this world. Does he think maybe it's settling down a little bit with all of the stuff that you're hearing from Congress and from the NCAA and the clearinghouse and the whatever you call all these things? Lane Kiffin had a lot of interesting things to say yesterday. He still wants a hard salary cap, just like he has from the start. I don't know that that's ever going to happen, but he was mocking whatever he said, whatever this is that we have. What do you call that? What was the decision made? That what do you call that group? It's got a weird name. I don't even know, but it's so hard to understand what all of this means. There's a lot of legislation and speculation about now what the collectives can be now. You're not supposed to give money to a player who isn't earning it by doing something business related, verified, like legitimate, which is how it's supposed to be. And the collectives are like laughing, going, wait a minute, you're changing the rules like that? There's no way you're going to stop our, the snowball that's been running down the hill from day one. Nobody's had to do anything to get the money. So how is this all going to work? Still nobody knows. So for Nick Saban to come back, I still don't think it's settled down enough for him to understand what it's going to be. It would still be a mess as he came back in. So I think it's a long shot.
One texter says Nick didn't like having to recruit the players already on his team, which the GM does for him now and didn't exist in college 3 years ago.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's stopping him.
There is now a whole layer of infrastructure that takes some of it off of the coach to manage the roster. But I still think that would be a hard thing for Nick Saban to deal with, right? Hey, my GM is saying my backup quarterback's about to leave. You know, that is still going to be a big part of the equation.
Matthew in Nashville foreshadowed where I'm going with this, but do you know what the Adam Vingan maximum chaos choice would be for me if Nick Saban would return to coaching in college?
Well, the maximum chaos would have to be Auburn. Wouldn't that be maximum chaos?
I was thinking more LSU.
Back to LSU?
Replacing Brian Kelly, going back to LSU. And as Matthew on our text line said, this has all the makings of Brian Kelly being fired and Nick Saban coming back to LSU to finish his story.
Finish his story?
It's another wrestling reference.
Yeah.
I won't bore you with the details. But yesterday, Brian Kelly said, quote, "It would be better for college football if Nick Saban is coaching, period. There's nobody better to develop players and certainly build championship programs. It'd be a great day if he was back in it." Now imagine, Brian, if that was at your expense, my friend, and Nick Saban returns to coaching in the SEC at LSU. That would be my vote.
I'm curious, too, just as we talk about this. Nick Saban was front and center in the SEC network coverage last year. Is he not doing that this year?
Yeah, he's not there. I don't know why.
And I found myself last year just glued to everything he was saying. He had tremendous insights. No disrespect to the guys on the panels as they sort of fill time when they're not interviewing somebody or showing somebody on the podium, but the discussion is not nearly the level that it was with Nick Saban. He was a huge mover of the needle and had me watching that stuff way more than I normally do. Because a lot of times they are just literally filling time and it's hard to figure out what to talk about. But he was finding stuff where I was like, hey, this is good stuff.
By the way, Kirby Smart, who is addressing reporters right now at SEC Network, was asked about this. Of course, a former Nick Saban assistant coach said, quote, "That's not happening. I don't think Nick's coming back. I think he's too happy where he is. I have talked to Nick pretty regularly and I just don't see it. It's one of those things that if he wanted to, he'd be unbelievable at it."
I hope that they continue to pick his brain on the things that are really important going forward. The shaping, it's probably going to take 5 to 10 years really to shape this. And by the time you get that done, more things will change in the world and you'll have to continue to tweak it. But there's such a seismic shift. People like Nick Saban, I don't know what title, they always throw out the title, the czar. We need a czar of college football. I don't know if you officially can be that, but he's a guy that you should come and get ideas from. And I think he's really good at getting people to have a legit discussion on the football stuff that can help bring some sense into this down the road. And can we get a system that everybody understands the rules? And we know going in, there's going to be cheating. People, whatever the rules are, and the SEC is the greatest example of it. Show me the rules. I'll show you the SEC will break the rules. They will do it. But that being said, I still think it's better if everybody understands what the rules are. And I think he can help. And another thing that's being discussed a lot is the playoff format. And in particular, whether you have 5 plus 11 or the 4 and the 4, all that stuff. It's what is the selection committee and their criteria looking for? How do you quantify the strength of schedule? That's where Nick Saban, I think, makes a lot of sense. And that's where I think he can help shape things if he's utilized in that way. So I don't know what he wants to do. He's one of these guys that can do anything he wants. Peyton Manning would be one, right? When career was over, he could have done anything. If he wanted to do what Tom Brady's doing, he could have done that. If he wanted to coach, could have done that. Wanted to be a GM, probably could have done that. He's chosen this unique thing that he does. So Nick Saban's got those same choices, even though he's older.
615-737-1025. We will continue our discussion on college football. It is SEC Media Days after all. There is a player who will address reporters today at SEC Media Days, who is the talk of college football. And I have to say, The hype train is out of freaking control. And we will discuss that coming up next. 615 737 1025. This week's Nashville's best deal of the week is Chiba Hut Toasted Subs, with a menu featuring over 30 signature sub sandwiches, as well as a variety of Rice Krispie treats, salads, and munchies. They combine homegrown food with real people in a relaxed environment. Get half off a $40 gift card now at thegamenashville.com/deals while supplies last.
Arch Manning is the top quarterback in the SEC. Fact or fiction?
That is fiction. Y'all have been drinking Paul Feinbaum's Kool-Aid for way too long. I have him as the 5th. Let me repeat that. The 5th best quarterback in the SEC. The hype train is out of control. And what are we basing this on? We're basing this on games last year against UTSA, Louisiana Monroe, and Mississippi State, who were 93rd, 103rd, and 118th in the scoring defense in the FBS last year. Look, I love Arch. I think he has a very high floor, but I don't think he's an elite talent when it comes to his arm ability, his ability to manipulate the pocket, to make guys miss, to change his arm angle. I think he's a really good quarterback, but the hype train's out of control.
That was Jordan Rogers on Arch Manning. Texas is at SEC Media Days today. Arch Manning will address reporters. That'll be interesting. But I agree with Jordan Rogers, who, by the way, you mentioned got his start on our station.
Yes, I don't know if he would acknowledge that, but he did. Darren McFarland and I used to bring him on from time to time, pre-SEC Network, pre-Bachelorette, by the way.
Oh,
so we knew him
old
when.
school.
We knew him when. We gave him the building blocks.
So what you're saying is he would not have been on The Bachelor. Was it The Bachelor or
I
The
think it was
Bachelorette?
The Bachelorette he was on, I think.
That sounds right.
So
he wasn't the Bachelor.
He wasn't the one that all of the women were clamoring for?
I think he was going out. I think he
was going after the woman?
He went deep into the show.
Okay.
With the.
But what you're saying is
he was playing in the CFL at the time. He was. He had been Vanderbilt's quarterback on some really good Vanderbilt teams under James Franklin, and he was in the CFL and around Nashville training, and came on a number of times before he launched his career in this direction. So, does he remember us? I don't know.
Shout out to the BC Lions of the Canadian Football League.
Yes,
that's who.
And I would always say, hey, we're going to be in Vancouver. You know, you might see you. I don't know if he remembers who we are. Actually,
he was on season 12 of The Bachelorette.
Yeah, okay. So as far as I am concerned, if not for you, Willie Donick, Jordan Rogers would not have a career. He would not have been on The Bachelorette, and he would not be all over SEC Network.
Spread the word on that. Let's just go with that. I mean,
with
this is how SEC week goes, right? With the
it's
SEC
a fertile
media
ground.
Days. Just get that tweet going.
If it wasn't
circulate it
Willie
around
Donick,
Atlanta. Get it to
Jordan
the people
Rogers
that are
would not
there,
be in the media.
Chase and Big Joe, and get that circulating.
Absolutely. But let's talk about Arch Manning for a moment, because it is Texas Day at SEC Media Days. It's also Auburn Day, Georgia Day, and Tennessee Day, and we will get to Tennessee in a little bit. But as we know, Willie Donick, quarterbacking is in Arch's blood. He's the grandson of Archie. He's the nephew of Peyton and Eli. The Manning legacy runs through his veins. And Paul Feinbaum, again, who joined Robbie and Rexroad earlier this morning, not only did Paul Feinbaum basically guarantee that Texas will defeat Ohio State in Columbus to open the season, Feinbaum caused quite a stir a couple of weeks ago when he said that Arch Manning is the best college football quarterback since Tim Tebow arrived on the scene nearly 20 years ago. Keep in mind, Arch Manning last season attempted a grand total of 90 passes. And as Jordan Rogers mentioned in that clip, 78 of them came against Mississippi State, Louisiana Monroe, UT San Antonio, and Colorado State. So I know that he's a Manning, and there's going to be a lot of hoopla that surrounds being a part of the Manning bloodline. I think the hype train is a little out of control. What do you think?
I think you have to understand you are somewhat new to the market. You were not in the market when Peyton and Eli were in the SEC.
That is correct.
That you cannot stop the Manning train. You cannot stop it. It's going. And I think nobody understands that more than the Mannings. And I think that allows Arch to deal with it. I think he understood it growing up, and I think he'll handle himself okay. That won't keep us from being annoyed from time to time about the hype train, the Manning train, especially at Texas and the expectations that drive that program. So it's going to be great theater, especially right from the get-go, because that's the game in college football to start the season, right? Texas and Ohio State.
Texas at Ohio State, Saturday, August 30th. So about 6 weeks away. Should be an excellent game.
And the beauty of it for both teams really is the loser should be fine. As long as it's a good game, the loser will still have plenty of opportunities to make the playoffs. As we found out, well, this is how it should be anyway, but this is the central discussion. Losing a game like that, how much should that affect the committee's decision? Because Lane Kiffin still believes there's way too much, and this team only had one loss, or this team only had two losses, and not looking into who you played, where you played them, and the strength of schedule overall. But having the guts to play that game is big.
So members of the SEC network and ESPN are trying to lower the temperature, I guess, on the Arch Manning hype. As you heard Jordan Rodgers say, he had Manning as the 5th best quarterback in the SEC. Heather Dinich has him the 4th best quarterback in the SEC behind Garrett Nussmeier, DJ Lagway, and Lenoris Sellers. But with all due respect to Nussmeier, Lagway, Sellers, whichever quarterback Jordan Rodgers also has ahead of Arch Manning, they're not Mannings. So there's going to be a lot of attention.
Well, even if his name were Jones, and he was just a guy that did not have the family tree, he was the incredibly highly touted recruit. So there would be hype even if it wasn't the Mannings. But you put them together and you have what you have. I'm actually surprised people are putting him 4th.
You thought he would be higher or lower? Higher or lower?
I thought he'd probably be a little bit higher, honestly.
Well, I think it's I think Jordan Rodgers and Heather Dinich are trying to have more realistic expectations.
Right, and they're doing what their job is, which is to fuel the fire, to get people talking.
Again,
one
Arch
person
Manning
takes one side of the argument and one person takes another.
Arch Manning attempted 90 passes last season,
which is actually more than a lot of backups when you get down to it. He got to start a game against a lesser opponent. I think it was Mississippi State. He also got to play in a lot of second halves of blowouts, but he at least got out there and got a feel for getting in there and getting some experience. So 90 passes is more than some of the guys who end up on the list. There's some guys who are projected to be really good because they're on a good team and their expectations are high, but they didn't play nearly as much as Manning played last year.
So Manning against Mississippi State went 26 for 31 for 325 yards and 2 touchdowns. His numbers were pretty impressive. Keep in mind the level of competition. Again, Mississippi State, Louisiana Monroe, UT San Antonio, and Colorado State. He also threw 6 passes against Georgia.
He did go in there against Georgia for a couple
6
series.
passes against Florida. But overall, he completed 61 of 90 passes for 939 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a QBR of 87.5. So impressive. But you also just have to keep in mind again the level of competition most of those passes came against.
Sure. And at the same time, I think we know he's going to be good. He's going to be really good. The question is, what happens in the big games that will define Texas's season? That's the drama.
And right off the hop, at Ohio State on Saturday, August 30th, they play at Florida on October 4th. They host Vanderbilt on November 1st. They're at Georgia November 15th. Their schedule isn't incredibly difficult in terms of their SEC games. They're at Florida, home to Oklahoma, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, home to Vanderbilt, at Georgia, home to Arkansas, home to Texas A&M. It's a relatively easy schedule on paper.
Yeah, and I saw the SEC network do their strength of schedule. Vanderbilt has the second hardest schedule in the country.
In the country?
Yes. Based on ESPN's metrics. Now, they have their own metrics. So you might see a different website that's got something different. Vanderbilt's at the end of last year, which is the most accurate when it's all said and done and everybody's played their games, because strength of schedule now for this coming year is all speculative, right? It's all what we think it looks like now based on your criteria. Last year, Vanderbilt was in the top 10. This year, going in top 3. Texas, I think that's a pretty good draw. I think that's a schedule that is just tough enough to where a committee would say, yeah, they play in the SEC. Yeah, they played Ohio State. If they've lost 2 games, that should be enough to get them in the field. That's what you're looking for. You want the balance of having to be tough enough that you won't have it marked against you by a committee, but not so tough that it schedules you right out of the playoffs.
By the way, according to ESPN, the top 11 hardest strength of schedules in college football are all in the top 12. No, top 11. The first non-SEC team that shows up is Wisconsin out of the Big Ten at number 12. The top 11 spots in strength of schedule are all taken by SEC teams. Do you happen to know the team ahead of Vanderbilt?
The team ahead of Vanderbilt?
Yes.
I forgot.
Florida.
And that was basically what they had to deal with last year, right? Florida had a really tough. Everybody's playing the same teams. So if you got a bad draw last year, unless everybody's completely different, you have the same draw this year. As we know with NIL, there is a little bit more of a wild card on the shuffling of rosters and how it's all going to shake out. Where's Ohio State in that, by the way?
Let's take a look.
The defending champions. They're playing Texas.
By the way, I did get a kick out of this. Robbie and Rexroad asked Paul Feinbaum about his Arch Manning take, and he said, quote, "You can never go broke being wrong about something," which I appreciate from Paul Feinbaum. He said, "Never be boring." So, quote, "You can never go broke being wrong about something." A direct quote from Paul Feinbaum.
Yeah.
Ohio State.
Jared Stillman certainly subscribes to that.
I was waiting for somebody to mention Jared. Ohio State is 18th in strength of schedule.
If you're Ohio State, that's perfect. Which means you should. It's just tough enough that if you win the league or come close to winning the league, you should be in the playoffs. That's all you want.
615-737-1025. Your outlook for Arch Manning as he begins his career as the starting quarterback of the Texas Longhorns. Arch Manning will address reporters today at SEC Media Days. Chase and Big Joe, of course, are at SEC Media Days. They will be there all week long. They're on from noon to 3. But your thoughts on Arch Manning? Is the hype train out of control for the young Manning? 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on that. But also coming up next, I have an important question for all you Vols fans out there. Tennessee also at SEC Media Days today. So I have an important question for all you Vols fans, and I'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace Vingan and Donick 1025, 1063. The Game. Really Donick, Adam Vingan. Some breaking news from our fearless leader, Chase McCabe. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey will join Chase and Big Joe tomorrow at 12:45. So Greg Sankey, SEC Commissioner, will join Chase and Big Joe live from Atlanta at SEC Media Days tomorrow at 12:45. One texter on Arch Manning, Willie, on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHunted.com. Arch Manning is the most overrated quarterback in history. I can't wait to watch Mississippi State whip him. If he wasn't a Manning, he'd be playing at Louisiana. First of all, don't disrespect the Ragin' Cajuns. That would be Louisiana, right?
It would.
Okay. Don't
Yes.
disrespect the Ragin' Cajuns. One of the greatest nicknames in all of college sports.
Amen to that one.
But Manning would still be an excellent quarterback. The last name on the back of his jersey certainly doesn't hurt.
Don't we find it interesting? It's a Mississippi State person.
Yes.
That's the one game he played in last year and won.
Do I need to remind the texter of Arch Manning's stats against Mississippi State last year?
Did he not hear these? You just said these.
I did, and I'm happy to read them again. 26 for 31 for 325 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Pretty good.
Completion percentage of 83.9%.
Mississippi State fans try to not remember all those games that were bad for them.
Yes.
That's what they try to do.
As Roger Clemens would say, misremember.
Exactly.
I believe they've misremembered. It's what he said to the Congress many times. Overhyped. There's a lot of definitions of overhyped because you cannot stop the Manning hype train. So by definition, he is going to be overhyped. Is he going to be good? I think that's a safe bet. The floor, he's going to be good. The question is how good and how early, because he's still pretty young. This is his 3rd year in college. So let's not forget that. He's been patient. He sat an entire year and redshirted, right? And then last year was patiently the backup. And so here he is. So he should be ready to jump in and be very, very good with a good understanding of a very good pro offense with pretty good weapons around him from the get-go.
So, Willie, it feels just like yesterday that we were engulfed with the Iamali drama. You can call it the Iamali saga if you want to.
I can't believe it took us till July to come up with that. Where were you back in?
I was with you, but
But you didn't come up with this term. You should have.
I've had a few months to think about it.
Okay.
Nevertheless, it seems like just yesterday we were all captivated by the Iamali drama or the Iamali saga. You decide which one you like more. Remember, Nico Iamaliava no-showed Tennessee spring practice. A lot of reporting about his NIL demands. Tennessee and Iamaliava parted ways. He's now at UCLA. And I remember around that time as we were discussing that, because we discussed that a lot. A lot of Tennessee fans, I seem to recall, said, good on Tennessee, good on Josh Heupel, good on the football program for standing its ground. And hey, if next season is a bit disappointing, that's okay, because we didn't want Nico Iamaliava anyway. I want to ask Tennessee fans 3 months later, as football season is right around the corner, are you still feeling that way? How are Tennessee fans feeling about the quarterback situation now that the season is upon us? If this season is disappointing, are you still going to give the Vols some grace after what happened with Iamaliava? Or is it just easy to say that in April when college football season is still 4 months away? So that's what I want to hear from all of you at 615-737-1025. 3 months after Nico Iamaliava left, how are you feeling about the quarterback situation in Tennessee? Because there are some interesting choices, Willie. The presumed starting quarterback is Joey Aguilar, who was a standout at Appalachian State, transferred to UT from UCLA. It was effectively a trade. Aguilar for Iamaliava. There's also former 4-star recruit Jake Merklinger, but he's an inexperienced redshirt freshman. And there's former 4-star recruit George McIntyre, a freshman who enrolled in January. So Aguilar, I think, has the inside track. There is going to be an open competition, of course, as Tennessee prepares for its season. But I want to know how Vols fans feel now, because it's easy to say, hey, if they go 7-5 next season, hey, at least we don't have to deal with Iamaliava anymore. But now that the season is upon us, I'm wondering how Vols fans feel now.
Well, I'm curious myself how the Vol fans feel. I mean, it is July. I can give you my assessment of what I think the interesting issue is here.
Sure.
It's a totally different profile of quarterback because Nico's goal all along here has been, let me reach my potential and be a high draft pick. And more power to him. We can argue whether this is the right path for him to reach that potential, but this is what he wants to do. So I give him credit for not just being satisfied by getting all this money that he's gotten. I will always knock him for the lack of ethics, or maybe it's not him, maybe it's his family, his dad, all of that stuff, for going back on his word of what was essentially a guaranteed deal and, reneging on that. That's what he did. But you're exchanging him, a guy who is a pro prospect, a prospective pro prospect, for a guy who is a college football quarterback. And that could look very, very different, and it could end up being surprisingly good, I think. And I couldn't tell you exactly. I haven't watched Aguilar play, but I look at Aguilar, I look at the profile. He's 23, so he's older. He's played a lot of college football. He's played 25 games. He's thrown 850 college passes. He's thrown for 56 touchdown passes. He's played in a program that's had success. Now, they didn't win a ton while he was there. They won some. But sometimes you can win, even in the SEC, with a guy who's not a pro prospect, just a good college football player. And I don't know what that's going to look like with this particular kid. I couldn't tell you. And it was a hasty decision. It's kind of like Tennessee had to go with what was out there. So I don't know if they would have chosen Aguilar. They kind of had to take him.
As I said, it was a trade, basically, because Aguilar left UCLA.
And not a fair trade. Not one where like, hey, we like Aguilar. You like Nico. We're kind of, let's swap. It wasn't like that, right?
A marriage of convenience, perhaps?
Perhaps. You had to pick from what was there at the grocery store. Here are the quarterbacks on the shelf. We haven't stocked the shelf.
Were they shopping in the bin? We like to talk about the bin.
I think the bin, there weren't many things in the bin. not a lot of quarterbacks in the bin. Especially, I saw a list one day that had Mike Wright, who played for Vanderbilt a couple years ago. I was like, he's still playing in college football? He's played.
Where is he?
I was like,
now?
that's the bargain bin. And I love Mike Wright, but
he's at Northwestern.
He was at one point. I don't know if he's still there. Is he still there?
Who's
He
that?
says East Carolina.
Yeah.
Pirates. That's what it says
yeah.
now.
So
Google says
let's
it,
get
but,
the
you know.
latest. Yeah, because he was in the portal. That's
So
at the time.
He traded.
So
one,
he was at Northwestern.
He traded one shade of purple for another shade of purple.
Apparently
going from
so.
Northwestern to ECU. He must like the color purple.
Okay, there's probably
He
some
went down
things in
south.
his wardrobe that could fit.
Yes.
As long as it didn't have the logo on there,
True.
I'll get away with it. But that's what I want to see. Hendon Hooker basically, at the time, was not a pro prospect when he was at Tennessee. He wasn't the starter, but he was older, and he had played a lot of college football. And lo and behold, he was a really good fit for the system. So can they catch lightning in a bottle twice? Because they stumbled upon Hooker. Fair to say?
I would say so.
And I think that is what we're finding out is that's how you win in the transfer portal is you find the right guy. It's not, hey, we got Michigan's backup. This Michigan guy, he just needed to play. He needed to play somewhere. He lost out to this other McDonald's All-American or high school 5-star recruit. And now we get him. That's not always the best guy. It's finding the right guy, whether he played for Appalachian State, East Carolina, or anywhere in between. That's what we're seeing a lot in not just football, but all across college sports. That's where these GMs, I think, are making their money.
By the way, Mike Wright at East Carolina, his third school in 3 years,
Right?
from Mississippi State to Northwestern to ECU.
You're not even counting the Commodores.
Like, okay, 4 schools in 4 years.
4 schools in 4 years.
4 schools in 4 years for Mike Wright. 615-737-1025. Okay, Vols fans. 3 months after the Iamali drama, which I'm now going to use, I regret that I did not come up with this 3 months ago. But 3 months after the Nico Iamali drama, how are you feeling about the quarterback situation now that the season is upon us? And how are you feeling about the Tennessee season, again, now that it is upon us? 615-737-1025. Also, Robbie Stanley asked Paul Feinbaum about Tennessee's quarterback situation this morning. We'll play that for you as well. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D-Mace Finnegan and Donick 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service, and we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek Mason out today. He will be back later this week as we celebrate Derek and his induction into the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. Jason Big Joe will be on from noon to 3. They are live from SEC Media Days in Atlanta. Our coverage is sponsored by Brewhouse South. Experience Nashville's ultimate sports and brew hangout at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs. We've also recently learned that SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey will join Jason Big Joe tomorrow at 12:45. So be sure to listen to that. So my question for all you Vols fans out there at 615-737-1025, Tennessee is at SEC Media Days today. No quarterbacks addressing reporters. But now that we are 3 months removed from all of the Nico Iamali drama, which I am now going to make a thing 3 months too late, how are Tennessee fans feeling about the team and the quarterback situation now that the season is upon us? Because as I said, I seem to recall a lot of you Vols fans saying, hey, I'm willing to have a disappointing season because Tennessee did the right thing by not acquiescing to Iamaliava's reported NIL demands. Terrell on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com says, as a Vol fan, I will give them grace. In football, there are surprises. For example, Hendon Hooker. My question has been, with the way things worked out, if Tennessee had paid him, would he still had transferred? I think he wanted to play near his home and forced the situation. One texter says, to be fair, I was nervous about the season even with Nico. It's an entire new offensive line and quite a bit of roster turnover overall.
I think that was going to be my follow-up question to the Tennessee fan base who follows this to the last detail. And that is there less pressure on Aguilar because of this whole thing of this is a year where you have to put it in context? They did what they did. I think across college football, they did the right thing. You cannot be held hostage by one player. That's admirable. And they were willing to take a step back if that's what's necessary. But I think that also relieves the pressure on Aguilar. Although the expectations will still, I think that's the pull, right? You still are expected to win at Tennessee.
Paul Feinbaum was on Robbie and Rexroad this morning. Robbie Stanley asked Paul Feinbaum about this. Here's what he said.
When you're going 7-5 or 8-4 this year, and we'll see what happens on that front. But what do you make of kind of the situation Tennessee's in at quarterback and where you think this may be headed?
Well, number one, Josh Heupel got a lot of credit for something he really had very little to do with. I mean, the guy walked out. So let's be real. He didn't kick him out. He didn't show up for practice, and the school did the only thing they could. And I understand why everybody praised Heupel because I was part of that group. But you're completely correct. If Tennessee's slumping toward a 7-5 season, nobody's going to remember that, and nobody's going to care. But I really don't think that's going to happen. I frankly think Tennessee has an upgrade in Joey Aguilar. I don't think he's got the raw ability that Nico did, but I think he wants to be there, and I think he will be a better whole package at quarterback. And I never understood all the fascination with Nico other than the money. I mean, that from day one, that's all we heard about, how much money he was making. But outside of a couple of plays, what did he do at Tennessee?
That was Paul Feinbaum this morning on Robbie and Rexroad.
I think it's a Paul Feinbaum-esque stretch to make the statement they might be better on the front end, because I don't know what he's basing that on. I haven't gone back through the tape of Aguilar. I would be interested in listening to somebody who has done exactly that, evaluated Aguilar, because Appalachian State is not chopped liver. The Sun Belt is kind of a rising conference. I think it's raised its profile, and Appalachian State historically has won a lot of football games. So that's what I don't know about Aguilar. When you take a guy from a program like that who's played a lot and he's older, now you put him around SEC talent, presumably a lot better talent than he's had around him. Does that allow him to turn the ball over less? That was a good discussion that Robbie and Joe had this morning. because that's the key. If you look at his stats, that's one thing that jumps out at you with Aguilar. He's thrown a lot of interceptions, more than he's going to be able to get away with if he's going to hold that job at Tennessee, because they've got two young, highly recruited quarterbacks that they're hoping turn into something, but they're really young. And so that will become the question if Aguilar can't get it done early is, well, let's see what the young kid can do. And that could be a dilemma that can have your season going a number of different directions.
So Adam Sparks, my former colleague at the Tennessean, now at the Knoxville News Sentinel, had a bit of a Q&A about the quarterback situation at Tennessee. One of the questions was, what are the chances that Jake Merklinger beats out Joey Aguilar? Sparks writes, quote, I'd put my money on Aguilar starting the opener against Syracuse, but that could change in preseason practice. It will be a legitimately wide open competition, which could stretch into the season. In 2021, Joe Milton transferred to UT after spring practice and started the first two games, but Hendon Hooker ultimately won the job. These quarterbacks in this situation aren't the same, but they're similar. Even if Aguilar initially wins the job, he'll have to play well to keep Merklinger off the field. The next question from Sparks is, why didn't Josh Heupel stick with Merklinger rather than add Aguilar? And Sparks writes, quote, it wasn't a binary decision. After Iamaleava transferred to UCLA, the Vols had only two quarterbacks and needed to add a third. Aguilar was the most accomplished quarterback to enter the portal in the spring aside from Iamaleava, so UT got him. Not adding a quarterback wasn't an option, and adding a lesser quarterback would have been foolish. Coach Josh Heupel hasn't abandoned Merklinger. If he outperforms Aguilar and demonstrates a better grasp of the offense, Merklinger will start.
I think that's a really good assessment, and it does illustrate how limited the options were. Aguilar was the only option, it seemed like. And only is a strong term, but he was clearly the best of the lot. If that had happened, if all of the drama had happened in January and not in the spring, I think they would have probably selected a different quarterback, right? With the money they would have had and the number of people in the portal, that might have been a different animal for sure, despite all the drama. And Tennessee fans would have easily been able to brush their hands and say, okay, get out of here, Nico. We've got so-and-so. But Nico put him behind the eight ball because the pool of quarterbacks to select wasn't very big. So that's the mystery of Aguilar. Is he the right guy? Because we see a lot. Let's take Vanderbilt. In basketball, who were the guys that turned the team around from a terrible team who fired their coach with a brand new roster? They weren't guys that came from all Power 5 conferences. Yeah, they did have a guy from Michigan State, right? But they had guys from North Texas, Cornell, other mid-major schools. So that is the thing that I think we couldn't have predicted 3 or 4 years ago, is that the mid-major guy on the way up, you get a label of mid-major. Oftentimes that's a guy that is really a high-end player that just happened to be developing at a slower rate when he's out of high school, right? So is Aguilar one of those guys? I don't know. But there's been a lot of guys like him that have come from Appalachian State or a team that doesn't sound sexy and done really well in the SEC in all sports, football, basketball, and baseball for sure.
And as we know, the SEC is an entirely different beast than,
of course,
the Sun Belt.
Of course.
And you can't fully understand what playing in the SEC is like until you actually do it. So I'm looking at Tennessee's schedule, and let's assume that Aguilar wins the starting job. His third game will be a home date against Georgia on September 13th. They start August 30th against Syracuse at a neutral site game. I want to say that game is in Atlanta.
Yes.
And then they host East Tennessee State before hosting Georgia. Tennessee doesn't go on the road until September 27th. That's their fifth game at Mississippi State. They're at Alabama, however, on October 18th. So if Aguilar is the starting quarterback, week 3 at home against Georgia, that'll be his first real taste of SEC action. But in terms of being on the road, that won't come until week 7, I guess, if I'm counting right, against Alabama.
Yeah, I noticed that Pat Forty wrote a really good column. He did a big, long dive into the college football schedule as a whole, and that was one thing he noted. Tennessee is among the teams in the country that have the most games at home before they go on the road. And so that is on paper an advantage. You can develop some things, work some things out, especially if you have a new quarterback situation. That's an advantage for Tennessee that they need to take advantage, that they need to, capitalize on.
Austin on our text line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com, says, I feel okay about the team and the quarterback situation. I think there will be a slight step back, but we'll get back on course. So I'm wondering if, this is a small sample, but it certainly sounds like some of you Vols fans out there would accept a step back this season, considering the quarterback situation. I want to know what that feels like in season. It's different to say it now.
And I think this is what we try to do now, and then come back to this discussion in the middle of September or October.
Yes.
When it goes a different way, because I was saying all summer last year for the Titans, hey, this is a rebuild. This is a rebuild. And then people were really mad when they were as poor as they were last year, because they told us they were going to be competitive. So it's harder in the moment to accept that you are, quote, taking a step back.
To your point.
And you have to, and it was not something you chose to do. They're having to do that based on the drama of Nico. What did you call it?
The Iamali drama.
Yeah,
I'm really
the
disappointed
Iamali
in
drama.
myself that it took me until July 15th to come up with that.
And I think you need to get that to Chase and Big Joe. Have them swirl that around.
Yes.
In Atlanta. See, you could do this. We could do this ourselves if we were there, but we're just not there. So we need Chase and Big Joe to carry the message.
To your point from that column from Pat 40 on the college football schedule, power conference teams that go the farthest into the season before playing a true road game. Missouri in its 7th game, Nebraska
7th game,
Missouri in its 7th game, Nebraska in its 6th, Tennessee, Penn State, Indiana, Rutgers, Miami, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest in their 5th.
Okay.
I need to look at Missouri's schedule now.
What the heck is going on with Missouri? How did they get all that? 6 games straight without playing a road game?
Let's take a look. Missouri schedule. All right. They open the season at home against Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, South Carolina, Massachusetts, and Alabama. Their first true road game is at Auburn on October 18th.
So wait a minute. Is it 4 straight non-conference games to start the year?
Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana. So 3. Then South Carolina.
Okay.
In game 4. Massachusetts,
okay.
UMass. And then Alabama at home on October 11th before going to Auburn on the 18th of October and Vanderbilt on the 25th of October.
So they bought some home games so that they don't go on the road. There are some teams in Vanderbilt got burned with this last year. Rather than pay big money to buy a win at home, they went to Georgia State thinking we should be able to win at Georgia State, and they didn't. But that does happen sometimes if you want to put your schedule out there. That's why the scheduling is such a big, important point with the committee, because we need to put aside the traditional ways that we evaluate the schedule if you're trying to make the playoff. If you're just trying to get to a bowl game, which some years Missouri has been that kind of team, then purchasing and making sure you're playing 4 non-conference home games, that's good. It's going to get you W's. That should be noted, though, if you're strength of schedule and you're on the bubble for the committee.
Here's another interesting SEC schedule note. Arkansas plays just one of its first 4 games in Fayetteville and faces a couple of little brother programs that would love to take down the Razorbacks early in Memphis on the road and Arkansas State in Little Rock. 3 2024 playoff teams are on the docket in Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Texas. These will be the first ever meetings between the Hogs in both Arkansas State and Notre Dame.
This is a point that James Franklin used to make all the time about the schedule. There's no bowl game. Let's say you're not in the playoffs, but you want to be bowl eligible. Well, there's one requirement. You got to win 6 games, right? And then there's the special circumstances or whatever. Sometimes, occasionally, a team gets in there with 5. But you got to win 6. There is no strength of schedule component. So let's take those 2 schedules, Missouri and Arkansas. if they both ended up 5-7, or they both ended up 6-6, or even Arkansas goes 5-7 with that schedule, not playing a home game until when? They don't play.
They play.
They play in Fayetteville when for the first time?
Well, they open at home.
It's in Little Rock or something.
Oh yeah. So they open at home against Alabama A&M.
Right, but it's not in Fayetteville, right? Don't they play a game in Little Rock? Either way,
Yes.
they don't take into account for bowl games where the games are played or who you played. That's why these teams in the SEC a lot of those teams will always say, let's play 8 and let us decide who we want to play in the 4 non-conference games. And if you want to schedule cupcakes or play at home to build wins so you have a better pathway of at least getting to a bowl game, you should be able to do that.
I'm looking up the Arkansas.
It'd be nice if the committee would say, well, that team ended up 4-8, but man, they played the second toughest schedule in the country. They're a good team. Let's put them in the bowl game. That's not how it works.
So Arkansas plays just one of its first 4 games in Fayetteville. Takes on Memphis on the road and Arkansas State in Little Rock. They also play at Ole Miss on September 13th before hosting Notre Dame on September 27th and visiting Tennessee on October 11th.
The schedule is a huge thing that we talk about every summer. Lane Kiffin said this yesterday on the SEC Network. He said, we get way too concerned of whether you have 2 losses, 3 losses, 1 loss. He said last year he felt like his Ole Miss team would have beaten the previous year's Ole Miss team by 10 points. But that team had less losses and went to a better bowl game. It was before the playoff system. This past year's team lost the 3rd game. Right, they famously came up short against Florida in a game that they needed to win to stay in the playoff hunt. But one team's record was better than the other, but he thought that the team with the worst record was way better. But it doesn't get factored in to when we evaluate college football seasons.
615-737-1025. We will take your thoughts on the Tennessee Volunteers. It is Tennessee Day at SEC Media Days. After all, once again, Chase and Big Joe live from SEC Media Days all week long from noon to 3. And our coverage is sponsored by Brewhouse South. Experience Nashville's ultimate sports and brew. Hang out at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, a week from today, Tennessee Titans rookies and veterans report to training camp and will be all Titans as I punch my microphone. I'm so excited. Titans. So I want to take a moment to talk about some of the other major training camp storylines around the NFL and which ones interest us and interest you the most. So at 615-737-1025, you can let us know which training camp storylines in the NFL outside of Tennessee interest you most. We'll discuss those coming up next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. This isn't just a concert, it's a cause. Trinetix's Rock the Cradle helps give fragile newborns a stronger start and keeps moms close when it matters most. With Tim McGraw live on stage and your support behind every beat, Ascension St. Thomas is turning music into healing. Tickets are on sale now at rockthecradlenashville.org. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Let's switch gears to the NFL. As I said, a week from today, July 22nd, Tennessee Titans rookies and veterans will report to training camp. We are 1 week away from Titans training camp, but there are other teams in the NFL, of course. And since we are going to be so focused on the Titans starting next week, I wanted to take this time, Willie, to look around the NFL and discuss other training camp storylines that also intrigue us and you as well at 615-737-1025. So when I ask you that question, Willie, which training camp storyline outside of Nashville interests you most? Which team, which storyline comes to mind for you?
The one that jumps out at me is the Patriots, because I'm very curious about the Vrabel, and I'm also very curious about the pathway of Drake May, because I think there's some parallels to Drake May and the season he had last year and what we think we might see from Cam Ward this year. I think Drake May in a fishbowl with a big fan base that's done a lot, as we know. They stunk, but he shined through where the fan base is mostly saying, okay, it's not him. He looks pretty good. We just need to get the pieces around him. Now they've gone and they've hired Mike Vrabel. They made the controversial decision to throw Gerard Mayo, a University of Tennessee guy, to the Wolves and just say, we put everything on him. And it was not, let's not even get into that, but it was not your normal way that you do it. You crown this guy as the successor to a legend, and you give him 1 year when you knew your team's going to be bad. Then you make a change. So there's pressure on Vrabel, I think, to show immediate improvement. So for all those reasons, and the obvious, of course, is in this town, people are very curious to see how Vrabel does. It probably won't reflect well on the Titans, Amy Adams on down, if Vrabel immediately does well for New England. So for me, it's New England without a doubt.
By the way, week 7, October 19th, noon, Patriots at Titans. I wonder what we'll be talking about that week. That is a good choice. The first team that comes to mind for me, and I acknowledge that I'm probably influenced by how much I see Aaron Rodgers' face on my television, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have had a very un-Steeler-like offseason. They bring in Aaron Rodgers, the worst kept secret in the NFL. And he's joining a team that also traded for Jalen Ramsey and a team that also traded for DK Metcalf. And they're an older team. Cam Hayward is pushing 40. Jalen Ramsey is 31, but that's sort of old in NFL terms.
It is.
Even DK Metcalf, who's in his late 20s, has been in the league for 6-7 years at this point.
It's hard to believe.
I'm curious just about how this is all going to work. There's the Aaron Rodgers of it all, playing for a stable organization, unlike his previous employer, the antithesis of a stable organization.
The Jets?
Yeah, right. I'm curious about that. I'm curious about the dynamic between Rodgers and Tomlin. And I'm also curious about how far the Steelers think they can go. Because the Steelers, and we're going to talk about rebuilding later in the program, the Steelers are the team that they'll always be in the mix. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, if I'm correct, right?
That's correct.
As coach
It's
of the
still
Pittsburgh Steelers. He's never had a losing season. They're always just good enough to sneak into the playoffs. Maybe they just miss the playoffs, but they get in there as the 7th seed in the AFC, and they're, to use your term, they're thrown to the wolves.
Yeah,
but to the second seed of the AFC.
Very tough division, so you have to give them that. But yeah, they're a very intriguing team for all those reasons.
This feels like we're going all in for 1 year sort of thing. And how successful can the Steelers be, especially in that division, which is ruled by the Baltimore Ravens?
Yes, there's no question that that's going to be a big drama from day one. There is just how they get along. and how much of a, I don't know if I would say it's an actual one, but it's going to be some version of a power struggle, right? Whether they intend for it to be or not, even if both sides come in with the right attitude, there's going to be some friction between how Aaron Rodgers has always done things and brought in his guys and the way the Steelers have always done things, the Steeler way. One thing that you have been able to count on, that as all of the things have evolved in the NFL over the last 30 years, the Steelers do things their way, for better or worse, right? So how do those two mix? It's going to be a great thing to watch.
The other storyline that fascinates me, we'll keep it in the AFC South, is how the Jacksonville Jaguars divvy up Travis Hunter's workload in training camp. And Albert Breer wrote about this for Sports Illustrated. He said, quote, Jacksonville's already on the record saying his baseline, meaning Hunter's baseline, will be first on offense, which matches the background of the new guys in charge. Liam Cohen is an offensive coach, and he will be the Jags play caller. GM James Gladstone, a.k.a. Doogie Howser, comes from a Rams franchise that
Does it say that in the article?
It does not. That was my own editorializing. James Gladstone comes from a Rams franchise that consistently invested in the receiver position and of late, post Jalen Ramsey, had pulled back on what it was spending on corners. And that is how the spring went. Hunter's first 3 weeks or so after being drafted were devoted to playing offense and learning Cohen's scheme. After that, the coaches started to integrate defensive work into his days. So I am interested to see how much time Travis Hunter spends on offense and defense during Jaguars training camp.
You touched on something that it gives me a thought I hadn't had so far. My thought in the big picture is, can you physically do it, play on both sides of the ball? We've had a lot of discussions about that. And if you try to do it, how long are you going to last and how effective are you going to be? Even if you're effective, will your body wear down? All of those questions. I didn't think about this part of it because D-Mace was pretty consistent throughout the evaluation process that he thought you'd be better off playing him as a full-time corner. And I think a lot of people echoed D-Mace's sentiment. Full-time corner, spot him on offense. We just talked to, is it Height, the kid, Martell Height.
Martell Height, yes.
For Vanderbilt. They announced he's been a defensive back and kick returner. They're going to sprinkle him in on offense. That's different than saying he's an offensive player that we're also going to play on defense. But I hadn't thought about this. You called him Doogie Howser, right?
Doogie Howser, yes. He's
the new coaching staff
me.
is all offense. So the coaching staff is coming in and they're salivating. I'm the head coach. Where do we want our first round pick? I'm playing him on offense. Like it's a self-serving thing almost. Is that really the best thing for the team? I hadn't considered that. Are they biased by saying, well, let's put him on offense because, they look at the offense without him and like, what are we going to do if we don't have a first round pick that's offense? So let's lean him that way. I wonder how that affected the decision.
Albert Breer continues, quote, what's really interesting is how different it is from Hunter's setup at Colorado and how just about every team I talked to pre-draft would have drawn it up for him. Over 2 years in Boulder, the overwhelming majority of Hunter's meeting and practice time was spent on defense.
Right.
That's because it's much easier to have things built in for a player without fully integrating him on offense than it is on defense. The offensive coaches would put in packages for Hunter and fill in the blanks by signaling and routes to him from the sideline. Of course, that wouldn't be the only way to do it, but it would be hard, if not impossible, to start a guy on an NFL defense without that player spending a significant amount of his time preparing on a week-to-week basis for opponents on the defensive side.
That's another great point that I have thought of, and I don't know what it's like in these meeting rooms, but can you imagine the amount of time he's going to have to spend in the meeting rooms? In theory, you would need to spend double the amount of time in the meeting rooms just to be even with everybody else on the team. And we're talking about a rookie.
Better get a sleeping bag.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, how do you, what do you do with the rest of your life? Do you just live in the facility? You got to have a life and time to get away from it sometime.
I'm glad that Travis Hunter is in the AFC South because I'll be paying attention to him more.
Right.
And I am incredibly curious about how all of this is going to go.
Last week we had our fun throwback, right? We did our rewatchable of a
Yes.
game from the 80s. I would venture to say that the game was a little simpler back then, right? I look at myself as a guy that was somehow managed to play 2 sports in the SEC, and I ask myself, could you do that today? I think, and I think I'm the last guy in the SEC to do it. As many reps as I did. Not that I lit it up in either one, but I played significantly. But I think with all that's asked of an athlete today, I don't think you could do it now. And that's why I wonder about Hunter with all of the details that you have in a defensive system. Like, you have to simplify one or the other. And they're choosing, I think, to simplify his plate on defense, if I'm reading Breer right here. Like, if you're a 2-sport athlete now, you cannot physically play the travel schedule in 2 different sports. They're going to overlap. There's too many. You're going to burn out. There's not enough time in the day. You can't physically be there. So is he an offensive player that dabbles in the defense? I just don't think you could be full-time in both and fully integrated, to use that term, in both. There's just not enough hours in the day.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Which NFL training camp storylines outside of Nashville interest you most as teams start reporting for training camp over the next week? 615-737-1025. We will continue this coming up next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace Vingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. By the way, Willie, Tom in Nashville on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, texted in a link to an article on AL.com written in 2019, 22 notable multi-sport athletes in SEC history. And I regret to inform you that you're not on it.
No. I am talking, when I mentioned myself, I'm only talking specifically basketball and baseball, not two-sport athletes in general.
I
didn't mean to imply I was the last two-sport athlete in the SEC. But if you look at baseball and basketball specifically, and then if you want to cut it a little finer, two-way baseball and basketball, then I think I'm the last guy to do those things.
You are the finest multi-sport athlete I know.
Well, there's that. There's that.
You are the only one I know, but that is why you're the best.
Okay. Who are the notable two-sport athletes that they mentioned there?
Let me pull up this article.
Bo
Again,
Jackson's one of them.
it was written in 2019. Let me see here.
Bo Jackson, unbelievable. Yeah. Football, baseball is probably the most common.
Yeah, because
two-sport
James
athlete.
Winston was like that.
And then
too.
there's football track is another one that's fairly common.
I believe Todd Helton was on this list.
Todd Helton, football,
Yeah.
baseball. Yeah.
That was the only name I recognized right off the jump.
Yeah. There was a guy that I played against. His name was Matt Blunden, who was he was the quarterback for Virginia, some really good Virginia teams. And I think he even played a bowl game against a good Virginia team against Tennessee when I was in school, early 90s. And he was also a pretty good basketball player. So football, basketball, occasionally. Julius Peppers comes to mind.
Yes.
Charlie Ward, of course. But and he's not SEC. But
Maurice Hampton, whenever he was at LSU, he played both baseball and football. But then once he transferred,
Yeah.
he just stayed with football.
yeah, there's been quite a few baseball, football through the years. Basketball, baseball. I want to hear that list.
Okay.
I got my hand up to my ear. Who you got?
At the moment, I don't have anybody.
The one I do know is Willie Donick.
There you go. So another thing we need to circulate through the SEC media days, even though it's football media days.
Chase, if you're
basketball
listening,
media
just
day.
put on our show.
Yeah.
Turn up the
Jordan
speaker.
Rogers got his start at 102.5 The Game. Adams got his
Iamali drama.
Eli. We got the terminology for the Nico drama, the Iamali drama, and now Donick. Was he the last two-sport athlete in specifically baseball and basketball? in the
Specifically.
SEC?
Remember that.
Specifically, baseball, basketball.
That's an important distinction.
Yes.
So another training camp storyline around the NFL outside of Nashville that I'm interested in, the follow-up seasons for the top rookie quarterbacks from last season. You mentioned Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. You can also throw in Michael Penix now that Michael Penix is getting his first real appointment as an NFL starter with the Atlanta Falcons. J.J. McCarthy is set to pilot a loaded offense after missing all of last year with a knee injury. So I am curious about all five of those quarterbacks and what they will be able to do in their sophomore seasons. Specifically, McCarthy, because he didn't have a rookie season because he injured his knee in the preseason. He did not play all of last season. And they made the decision, the Vikings, that is.
The decision.
Decision.
It wasn't a LeBron, the decision, but that was a big decision.
That was a big decision to move on from Sam Darnold after Sam Darnold had an outstanding season with the Vikings. And the Vikings are putting a lot of faith in J.J. McCarthy, whom they drafted, number 10 overall last year, that they can plug and play and keep things going with McCarthy. So that is one I'm focused on. But I am curious about Caleb Williams as well, now that he has Ben Johnson as his head coach. So of those five second-year quarterbacks, Willie, you mentioned Drake May already. Which one of them intrigues you most as the season begins?
I think it's McCarthy for the reasons we said, because there's so much riding on that. When they had last year at this time, we weren't really talking about the Vikings as a team that was supposed to contend. There was a lot more stock being bought in the Bears, right? In that division, there was a lot of, hey, the Bears could be that rare team that spent a lot of money in free agency. They've been picking high. Now they get the rookie quarterback. They're that rare team that could make a jump with a rookie quarterback. It was much more about them than it was the Vikings. They were the other team in the division. We already knew about two really good teams in the Lions and the Packers. And so now the expectation level is changed for the Vikings after the year that they had last year. And now the bar is set high. I don't know how it's pretty, let's say it's pretty unique, McCarthy, in the situation he's in. Being a first-year starter, even though it's his second year in the league, and he's expected to win right away. That's tough for a guy that when he was playing in college, I didn't think was going to even be a first-round pick. He was a late riser with his stock to get drafted in the first round. And now they have enough faith in him that after a serious injury, he was the right choice to take over the quarterback race. Are they willing to take a step back, to take 2 or 3 steps forward with him? I don't know. That's usually not how the league works.
Ron on our text line says, curious about Cleveland and their quarterback position. I think that is a popular choice. Plus, I'm curious about the second-round players holding out on contract signings. We discussed this yesterday. 30 out of 32 second-round draft picks have yet to sign their contracts. The two that have, the top 2 picks of the second round, received fully guaranteed contracts. And I found this on The Athletic after we discussed this yesterday. Quote, most people believe that first-round rookie contracts must be fully guaranteed, but that's not true. Instead, the practice evolved since the 2011 CBA was signed, and only because the unofficial standard in 2022, when every first-round pick managed to sign a fully guaranteed deal. So while each pick has a slotted salary, guarantees are a free market negotiation. In 2024, second-round guarantees cascaded down from 95% for number 33 pick Keon Coleman to just 52% from the round's final pick, 49ers cornerback Renardo Green. This weekend, Chargers wide receiver Trey Harris became the first training camp absentee after NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reported that the number 55 pick was absent from his team's July 12th deadline to report. Reminder, don't call Harris or his peers holdouts. My bad. Since these second-round picks are not under contract, they cannot be fined or otherwise disciplined for missing training camp.
Something to watch. I feel like there'll be a flow right before training camp, but I don't feel like all of them are going to sign.
There is one player, according to The Athletic, that everybody is waiting for. Tyler Shuck, the second-round quarterback drafted by the New Orleans Saints. He's got a ton of leverage because Derek Carr suddenly retired.
What are you New Orleans people saying? Your Saints people, what are they saying?
About Shuck?
Yeah, are they gonna give him a guaranteed contract? Come on, we just went through all of this. They colluded not to give Lamar Jackson a guaranteed contract. Why would you give Shuck a contract that's guaranteed?
The Athletic says if the Saints fully guarantee the salary for pick number 40, everyone drafted prior to Shuck could demand the same. While those after him,
in the right mind, guarantee a quarterback who was drafted in the second round. You can't do it.
The Saints may not have a choice, though. Again,
really?
Who's playing quarterback for the Saints? Spencer Rattler? Oh, God.
Yeah.
I don't love
Bring it on.
I don't love the idea of that.
But do you love the idea of guaranteeing your second round quarterback?
No.
You can't guarantee his contract. We don't know if he can play or not.
I'm looking to see.
Can you imagine the Titans guaranteeing Will Levis's contract?
Oh, my God.
He was their second round pick.
He was.
Let's guarantee his contract. I mean, that would be the biggest albatross going. Not that it's a ton of money for a second round pick, but still.
So Femi Oladejo was drafted after Tyler Shuck. So that's good news if Tyler Shuck gets a guaranteed contract, because you hope the guarantees decline as you go spot by spot.
Maybe Shuck will hold out, and then the Saints will trade for Will Levis. And Will Levis will be that's how the Titans will move on from Will Levis.
Perhaps
that could be a training camp story.
That could be a training camp story.
And then Will Levis will shine for the Saints, and you'll be sitting here every Monday going, "Look at Will Levis and the Saints. This is amazing."
You'll be tweeting out, "Aw, Shuck."
I was
Just
thinking more
right
Shucky
alongside
Ducky
his
quack,
latest
quack.
tweet of the Ian Malley drama.
Yes. And in New Orleans, they don't prefer mayonnaise. They prefer a aioli.
Ah, I see.
So if Hellman's makes aioli, maybe Levis could tap into that.
Okay.
They
I can see it
they
developing.
like a little bit more flavor in New Orleans than just mayonnaise. You know, you got to spice it up a little
You
bit.
got to spice it up a little bit.
You got to spice it up a little bit. One texter says, I live down in New Orleans. They love Shuck, but doesn't every team love their new player? LOL, especially the quarterback. They're like a shiny new toy.
I think people liked Will Levis going into his first year.
Right. But the Derek Carr sudden retirement puts all of the leverage in Tyler Shuck's hands. Unless the Saints are comfortable playing Spencer Rattler.
The owners are colluding right now as we speak.
Literally.
They're
as we
going
speak
back
right
through
now.
all the memos. And they're like, remember these emails we had that the arbitrator said there wasn't enough? Can we recirculate those?
For the second round
no
picks?
no new conversation. I just want you to reread these emails that we had and make your decisions accordingly.
Oh, boy. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. We'll take your thoughts on training camp around the NFL. The Titans report to training camp 1 week from today. Get excited. But coming up next, there is a word that GMs in every sport are hesitant to use. That word, to borrow a phrase from my son, is a potty word. It begins with an R. It's not actually a bad word, but it is a bad word when GMs say it because fans don't know how to react to it. But there was a story written about this word that I want to get into coming up next because it's a topic that Willie and I, we've been going back and forth about this for years. And now we have some data to actually discuss it. And that's what we're going to do coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Dunick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game. D. Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Chasing Big Joe live in Atlanta for SEC Media Days. Their coverage starts at noon, and it is sponsored by Brewhouse South. Experience Nashville's ultimate sports and brew hangout at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs. We may be joined by Chase McCabe in the final segment of our show. We can get a nice little check-in from Atlanta at SEC Media Days. So, Willie, before the break, I said there is a word that general managers are hesitant to use. They may consider it a potty word, which is a new saying my 3-year-old son uses. I also freaked out David Janes when I was going to talk about this word. It is not an actual obscenity, so don't worry. But that potty word, quote unquote, is rebuild. And it's a popular topic of conversation across all sports when things aren't going well. And if you haven't noticed, things aren't really going well around here for our two major professional sports teams, the Tennessee Titans and the Nashville Predators.
And the word, just to finish your thought or add to your thought,
yes,
about the potty word, we saw a great example the last couple years. The Titans will not use that word.
They will not use that word.
They will not use that word. They steadfastly, when asked about it, is this a rebuild? No. It's not a rebuild.
Again,
we're not rebuilding. They will not use it because it's a potty word. It's seen as a very a white flag waving kind of thing.
The thought of Titans brass using the word rebuild makes them throw up in their mouth a little bit. Like we're not rebuild. Like they can't even get the word out because it makes
and
them
the Predators as well, right? Barry Trotz has been asked a lot. He's more philosophical about it, but he and Andrew Burnett have said, no, this is not what we're doing. We don't want to do that.
So last week, I stumbled across an article at dailyfaceoff.com written by Paul Paduti with the headline, "Do Rebuilds Actually Work in the NHL?" It is a fascinating read. And Paduti's goal was to answer these key questions. How long does a rebuild usually take? Does it actually work? And why are teams rebuilding so slowly today? Now, Willie, you and I have had some animated discussions over the years about the plan. That's a trigger word for Willie Donick when it comes to the Predators sometimes.
Right.
We've had some animated conversations about the Predators' plan. And I thought that Paduti did a really good job of laying out just how successful rebuilds can be. So let's start here. Here is how Paduti set the parameters for what he considers a rebuild. A rebuild starts when a team has at least 2 bottom 10 finishes, including a bottom 8 finish in a 3-year period. So according to Paduti, that's when a rebuild starts. So even if you have a good season within that stretch, it doesn't count as you exiting the rebuild.
Right.
According to him, you exit the rebuild when you make the playoffs in consecutive years or win the Stanley Cup in your return to the postseason. So those are his parameters. You can argue with those parameters, but we will use those parameters for the purpose of this exercise. And here's what I thought was interesting. He put together a chart of NHL rebuild timelines of the salary cap era. So since the 2005-2006 season. According to his guidelines, in the salary cap era, so the past 20 years, there have only been 3 NHL teams that have not undergone a rebuild. The Dallas Stars, the Vegas Golden Knights, and keep in mind the Golden Knights have been around for less than a decade, and your Nashville Predators, according to Paduti, are the only 3 teams, based on his criteria, that have not undergone a rebuild over the past 20 years.
So really 2 when you get down to it, because
Let's call
Vegas
it 2.5.
hasn't really. Vegas is such a unique situation. So, yeah, 2.5 is a good term.
Let's call it 2.5. But there is this really cool color-coded chart and all of that. But I do want to get to the crux of this article. So according to Paduti, there are 13 franchises that are at least 4 years into a rebuild right now. So nearly half the league.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based on his guidelines, the Predators would enter a rebuild if they once again finish in the bottom 10 of the NHL standings this coming season. So, Willie, when we have these discussions, you often note there is no guarantee that a rebuild will work. Look at the Buffalo Sabres. Look at the Detroit Red Wings. They've been rebuilding for eons. It feels that way, at least. And they have gotten no closer to competing. So what Paduti did, which is easy for me to say, what Paduti did was he looked at the 20 rebuilds completed in the last 20 years, some of which extend past the salary cap era, so before 2005, 2006. He looked at the past 20 rebuilds to see how long on average those rebuilds take. His findings were the average rebuild takes 8.5 years.
8.5 years.
8.5 years.
How old will your son Arlo be
in 8.5 years?
8.5 years.
Well, he turns 4 next month.
Turns 4.
So he'll be 12, 12-ish, 12, 13.
He'll be in middle school.
He'll be in middle school.
Oh boy.
That's a big jump. That's a long time. 8.5 years.
He notes in the article.
That's the average.
The average of the 20 completed rebuilds of the last 20 years. The average length is 8.5 years.
And remember, that's just not making the playoffs in consecutive years.
Yes.
You could even make the playoffs in one of those years and still be in the rebuild. It still takes you 8.5 years.
So, for example, to your point, Willie, for example, the Colorado Avalanche were rebuilding between 2009 and 2019. They had a third place finish in 2014.
Right.
But that was
a little bit of an anomaly. Yeah.
Precisely. So just because they finished third in the league that 1 year doesn't mean they were out of the rebuild.
So they did have at least a couple of flickers of interesting hockey, but I think we would call them a team that had a successful rebuild, right?
Because they won the Stanley Cup.
They won the Stanley Cup, and they've been a top 7 or 8 team in the overall standings for now 6 straight years. So they're in the window now.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did to get that, they went through 11 years of technically, and now you can say that
11 seasons.
They were coming out of it. Remember when they lost to the Predators in the first round, when the Predators won the Stanley Cup in 2017-18, they snuck in there, made the playoffs, and made it again in 2019. So I think you can say they were coming out of it after 8 years, but basically they had 8 really rough years. 8 years of building to get what they have now. Now, because it was successful, because it's so far in the rear view, their fans would say, yeah, that worked. But when you're in those 8 years, I can remember traveling to some games out there where the crowds weren't real good. They didn't have much to lean on. Remember the Patrick Waugh? That was a real volatile time that they had. You got to go through some rough times. The question is, to me, when we look at these, is really when you see the 8.5 years, is it worth it? Is that what you have to do?
We will get to that.
And are there better pathways, the pathways that the Stars and the Predators are trying to do? Stars have been successful with it, I think. The Predators are trying to be successful with it. Is that the better way to go about it? Or do you just have to resign yourself to saying, if you're going to go into the rebuild, prepare for 8 to 10 years of being bad?
So let's use the Tampa Bay Lightning as an example. As Paduti writes, quote, the Lightning fell near the bottom of the NHL in 2008, stayed there for most of 6 years, drafted future Hall of Famers Steven Stamkos, Victor Hedman, Nikita Kucherov, and Andrei Vasilevsky. And by 2015, were prepared to be a perennial threat. 4 Stanley Cup finals and 2 rings later, John Cooper is still squeezing playoff spots from that rebuild today, just like they drew it up.
Yeah, you have to say that that was an extremely successful rebuild, and it was relatively short. Tampa.
By the way, the Panthers topped the list for futility. According to Padudi's criteria, the Panthers were rebuilding for 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years.
If you go back before the salary cap.
Yes.
And the
from 2001 through 2021, they were rebuilding. But you know what? Now they've won back-to-back Stanley Cups and have been to 3 consecutive Stanley Cup finals.
Right. So I don't know that you could even say that they were rebuilding.
That is the extreme end of the scale. But again,
Yes,
the average
they were
length.
just not a good franchise
Right.
for a good part of that. Tampa, I think you could say, because they had gone to the Stanley Cup final and won it in 2004.
Yes.
Then sort of had the remnants of that for a couple years, then dipped back down. They were successful in that they dropped really low, very quick, and then hit it big with the high picks that they had. And it happened relatively quick that they got back. Like that would be the ideal rebuild, right? Because not only have they won multiple Stanley Cups and had a great franchise for a long, long time, and they're still a good team. They're not as good as they were a few years ago, but they still go into a season thinking you got a chance. That would be the model that you could follow. But very few teams have been able to hit it like that, right? Feast to famine, go down quick, and then come back up even quicker.
The fastest possible rebuild under Padudi's definition was executed by the Carolina Hurricanes. They rebuilt in the minimum 3 years. After losing the 2002 Stanley Cup final, the Canes crumbled to finish 30th, which was last place at the time, 22nd, and then won the 2006 Stanley Cup with Peter Laviolette.
And that was interesting because it was the first year of the salary cap
era. It can be done, but tossing the samples outliers, we're looking at 5 to 12 years with 8 or 9 years as the norm, as the average for a rebuild.
But Carolina, it should be noted, dipped back down quickly. Peter Laviolette was fired. I know you're surprised to hear that. He does his thing, and then he moves on.
Then they rebuilt from 2010. They rebuilt from 2010 through 2020, if I'm reading this chart right.
See, the thing about this chart is that you could have 2 really good teams, but you're not out of the rebuild technically until you do it for a 3rd straight year. I don't know if I would say that that's
certainly you can argue with
coming
the
out of
criteria.
it. They got good in 2019. They got really good, but still, that's 8 straight years. Here are the finishes for one of the most successful, consistent franchises going right now, the Hurricanes. They are consistent. They haven't won it all, but a lot of people would take their track record the last, 1, 2, 3,
They've
4,
won
5, 6, 7. They've been a top 10 team for 7 straight years now.
They win at least a playoff
And they win a playoff round
every year.
But it took them this run, 2010. They finished 24th, 19th, 23rd, 25th, 24th, 26th, 18th, 20th, 21st. 8 straight years of being an also-ran.
And to your point,
not even sneaking into the playoffs.
And to your point about them being one of the most consistent teams in the NHL, they have yet to get over the hump.
They haven't won the whole thing.
Correct. They've made it to the conference final on multiple occasions, but have not been able to break through to the Stanley Cup final.
It's such a I have a hard time saying you have to win the cup for it to be a quote successful rebuild. To me, what Carolina has done, when you give yourself a chance for that many years in a row where you have a legit shot, that's all you can do. And you just have to hope that your players break through and have that one great year where everything goes right.
Let's go to Luke on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Luke, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, Willie, do you think that it's a situation when you're rebuilding like this to pick, Vincent Lecavalier instead of David Legwand or somebody like that situation? Like, is it the right player more than it is the coach? Because I feel like you can carousel tons of coaches into catching a guy like that's outrageously more talented than the next guy.
Thank you for the call, Luke.
I think that is a little bit of the luck of the draw is when you do this, who happen to be the top picks at the top of a draft. Because you're not going to pick first every year. Like he mentioned, Vincent Lecavalier and David Legwand, those were the first 2 guys picked in the first draft the Predators were ever in. And there was a pretty big gap. I mean, Leguan was certainly not a bust. You know, he played in the league as a good player for a long time, but LeCavalier was a pretty good franchise player, right? He was a bigger hit. So when you're in a rebuild, you're picking, let's just say what, in the top 5 to 7 a lot of times. Sometimes what was Victor Hedman? 5th, something like that. Kucherov, these guys that end up being picked 5th, 6th, and you get a franchise all-star.
Hedman was the second overall pick in 2009. Kucherov was a second-round pick in 2011.
Kucherov was a second rounder?
Yes, 58th overall.
Okay.
Steven Stamkos, of course, was the first overall pick in the draft. Andre Vasilevsky was the 19th pick in the 2012 draft.
So I do think sometimes drafts are deeper than others, as we noted a lot of times. Supposedly, only time will tell, this was not a good year to have the 5th pick. The Predators had to make do with that, right? They're hoping they get a special player in Brady Martin, but it doesn't look like it's a slam dunk, as much of a slam dunk as it does some years where the draft is supposedly deeper.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Do rebuilds actually work in the NHL? As Paul Paduti writes for Daily Faceoff, the average length of the 20 rebuilds completed in the salary cap era is 8.5 years, as Willie emphasized. How successful have they been? The results may surprise you. I will share that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. I didn't mention this earlier in the show, but according to John Rothstein, Memphis's Nolan Smith, I should note, national champion with Duke, is finalizing a deal to be the next head coach at TSU. Nothing is officially done, but the two sides are working towards an agreement. So,
Okay. So maybe Adam will be watching a little more TSU Tiger basketball. around the corner.
if Nolan Smith's tenure at TSU goes as well as Nate James's did at Austin P, I'm not sure I'll be watching a lot of it because I don't feel like Nate James lasted a long time at Austin P.
Okay. Okay.
But we shall see. So we are talking about NHL rebuilds and do they actually work? A story by Paul Paduti on dailyfaceoff.com. So here is the gist of it. According to his criteria, the average length of a rebuild, of a successful rebuild in the salary cap era, takes 8.5 years. 8.5 years. Keep that number in mind. That's a long time. As you noted, Willie, my son will be 12 or 13 years old by then. But here's the question. How successful have those rebuilds been? So taking those 20 rebuilt franchises, here is what Paul Paduti found. Quote, the 20 most recent rebuilds were extremely successful. The teams that set themselves up to peak at various points between 2006 and 2025 have mostly done exactly that. Half of the 20 rebuilds resulted in at least one Stanley Cup, generating 17 of the 20 titles in the cap era. Only the 2007 Ducks, 2008 Red Wings, and 2023 Golden Knights were not products of traditional rebuilds that ended in the cap era. Every rebuild can't end with a cup, though. There is only one to go around. But even those franchises, sans Stanley, have had legitimate success from rebuilding. Whether Cup Finals appearances, Edmonton, multiple conference final berths, Islanders, lengthy postseason streaks, Toronto, or a President's Trophy, Rangers, all but two of the rebuilds created competitive teams. While it's cup or bust in public, there are many owners and GMs that would love to make a conference final or build a postseason lock to roll the dice with annually. Our rebuild criteria create a self-fulfilling prophecy. If a franchise can finish near the bottom of the league a couple of times and build a roster good enough to get in the playoffs in consecutive seasons, success over the next decade is extremely likely.
Yes. So basically what you're saying is if you put in the time, the 8 years or whatever, you usually do see some fruits.
Yes.
It remains to be seen for a team like Ottawa. And Buffalo would be another one that's still looking for the end of the rainbow here. One thing that's interesting to me about this era, because there's a difference between 2006 through 2013 if you're rebuilding as opposed to now. And it's this. Now, at least the trend has been, you rebuild, you get the high picks, you often, and I think this has been the case with Buffalo, it's definitely been the case with Ottawa. I think we look closer, there's other examples where you have to invest in the players big money before the team wins. Ottawa would be the best example. They've got their team laid out. There's not a whole lot of room for them to add veteran pieces to the young nucleus that they've taken so long to build. Ottawa finally made the playoffs, so they're technically still in the rebuild according to this criteria. But let's say they're out of it.
The Senators would need to make the playoffs again this coming season to be out of the rebuild, according to Paduti's criteria.
Okay, so Ottawa finished to get to where they are now. 30th, 31st, 30th, 23rd, 26th, 21st, 26th. And then last year they finally got in there. So 7 straight years of being bad and picking high. But what's happened in there is they've had to make some decisions on players while they have not seen success. Tim Stützle would be one of the featured guys. He's a really good player. They're paying him handsomely. He's still young, but they're locked into him. The expectation is for him to be a star. He hasn't won anything yet. And so there's a lot of guys on their roster that it looks like it's going to happen, but they've already had to commit. And in doing so, they haven't left themselves a lot of room to find that Ryan O'Reilly or that extra guy, that crafty veteran that costs you a certain amount but puts you over the top. That's the hard part about this, is you got to make decisions on guys even before you see the fruits of your rebuild with the contracts that are out there.
So the Predators, according to the criteria laid out by Paul Paduti, are one of, we'll call it two and a half teams that have not rebuilt in the salary cap era. The others, the Dallas Stars and the Vegas Golden Knights, they're the half since they've been around for the past, 8-9 years. But the Predators would enter a rebuild after this season if they finish once again in the bottom 10. So here's the question. Here's the $1 million question. Based on the findings of this research, rebuilds are highly successful. Would it be in the Predators' best interest to have another bottom 10 finish this season, to enter a rebuild, to have another opportunity to draft high, knowing that, again, according to this data, it is more likely than not that it will lead to success in the long run?
I think the Predators situation is unique because we're putting all of the rebuilds into one category here, but when you look at team by team, there's a lot of different ways that they got there. We just talked about Ottawa finishing very low for a long time. The Predators, just by finishing low 2 years in a row, that would only be 2 high picks. I think there's a chance. We've talked about this. They have the ability this year, especially with their roster flexibility, the Duchesne buyout coming off of the books next year, to really go in an aggressive direction after this coming year if they want to. And they've also stocked their farm system already with a lot of good prospects. Now, they don't have that high pick that is a franchise-changing guy, which everybody loves to covet. San Jose is really going all in for that. They've gone now 6 straight years of being pretty bad. The last 2 years, they finished dead last. And they're getting lauded for handling it pretty well. They like what they're doing. But the fact is, it's going to take at least a few more years before they're in position to win anything significant.
And the Sharks had their run. They were one of the best teams in the league for several years, went to the Stanley Cup final the year before the Predators went to the Stanley Cup final. Both teams lost to the Penguins. But to your point about the young players in the system, friend of the show, Scott Wheeler, yesterday published his list of the top 100 drafted NHL prospects. The Predators have 6 players in this top 10 list. I believe tied for second most, according to Wheeler. Here's the issue. The highest rated player, I should say, for the Predators on this list is Brady Martin, whom they just selected with the 5th overall pick. He comes in at number 22. He's in tier 3. Now, it doesn't say what tier 3 means, but he is in tier 3. The next closest player is Tanner Molendyk at 40, Cameron Reed at 61. They are both in tier 4. In tier 5, Riker Lee at 74, Matthew Wood at 90, and Zachary LaRue at 95.
Right. And the Predators would have their own evaluation of all their guys. I think what they have is a wide volume of players that they think can be good, winning NHL players. They're not all going to make it. And I don't know if any one of them is going to be the game-breaking superstar. That would be really nice. But if you get a pool of good players coming up through the system together that are cheap for a while, that gives you the ability to build a roster. So this is where we've gotten into a lot of pick your lane. What they're trying to do is if it goes south this year, which it very well could, you're not going to hear a lot of people go into the season saying, hey, the Predators, they're going to be awesome. You're not going to hear that. It'll be a much more skepticism. And if it goes that way, they can pivot and pick high again. And who knows, long term, that might be the best thing for the long term. You have a second straight year. But they're going to be in a much better position to come back up the charts faster, I think, because they haven't mortgaged their future. They already have a good farm system, and they would have another high pick to go with it. And we just mentioned a lot more salary cap room. But they're giving themselves a chance to where if things fall right this year, maybe they come back and get into the playoffs again. If Saros, Yossi, Forsberg rebound and have great seasons, the free agents they signed last summer are better this year. You can talk yourself into and see a plausible scenario where they're a good team next year.
What that list from Wheeler says to me, and we've discussed this, that the Predators prospect pool is deep, but it's missing that
The crown jewel.
correct. And the Predators hope Brady Martin can be that player. I wonder if it would be in their best interest to have another high pick that they can team with Brady Martin, similar to what you're seeing. You mentioned San Jose, and we don't know if that's going to work out, right? But they've got Macklin Celebrini. They have Will Smith. They have Michael Misa. You hope that that is the next core, the next version of Joe Pavelski and Logan Couture and Joe Thornton, right?
Mhm.
Patrick Marleau. You're hoping for that. So the Predators have plenty of solid prospects. To use your term, they're missing that crown jewel.
Yeah.
But you look at some of these other teams that have undergone these rebuilds, right? McDavid and Draisaitl, Barkov and Ekblad, Stamkos and Hedman,
Taves and Kane.
Taves and Kane, McKinnon and Makar and Landeskog and Rantanen. You need multiple of those top picks.
Yeah.
Now you need them to reach their potential, and that's no guarantee.
Mhm.
But you have more opportunities the worse you are to pick up there to find those players.
For every group of players like that, the ideal ones that you just mentioned, there's other teams that didn't get that. Like the Devils, they got Nico Hischier, who's a good player. He's not Makar, McKinnon, the caliber that we're talking about. And so that's made it harder for the Devils to get great. They haven't been great. They still technically are in the rebuild category in this criteria.
Yes, they are.
Here's one thing that I found very noteworthy with your question, right, to the audience is, are you okay with this if you do a rebuild? Because that's the question I always ask. Are you willing to go through? I don't even talk about 8 years. I talk about 4 years or 5 years. Are you willing to have 4 or 5 years of struggles, big struggles? In the article, it does talk about how the fan base usually is pretty patient, right? If you declare you're in this rebuild, you get time. And the fans are like, okay, I see what you're doing. But do we think that's actually true?
It says here at the end of the article, why are so many front offices moving glacially slow to rebuild their rosters right now? And one of them is fan bases are more accepting of rebuilds. If you scroll through social media for 30 seconds, you might dispute this point. But despite how impulsive fandom has become, rebuilds are considered the best way to win consistently. Not long ago, it would be embarrassing to miss the playoffs 3, 5, or 7 times straight. Now, it's just part of the plan.
Okay, so I think this would be a great question to ask Blackhawk fans, right? The Blackhawks, since the Predators swept them in 2017, on the way to the great run they had, the Blackhawks have been 25th, 20th, 23rd, 20th, 27th, 30th, 31st, 31st. Are they still sitting there going, yeah, we're okay. Yeah, we're all right. Let's just keep drafting high. We're going to get there. I wonder how that works, honestly, because these are key questions, because I think there is still a faction of the Predators fan base that still believes that that is what you're supposed to do, right? It's as the article points out, it's sort of accepted practice by some of the GMs, because the Blackhawks are not alone here, right? You mentioned about there's at least double-digit teams.
Nearly half the league is under a rebuild right now.
And conservatively, even if you don't go strictly by their definition, it's at least a third of the league.
Yeah.
That have been in this cycle for 4 or more years already and counting.
One texter, Joel, says, if we could guarantee Gavin McKenna, then tank. But Trotz and definitely Bruno have no interest in having another season as the last. Joey from Gallatin says, I just can't see Trotzy being okay with finishing bottom 10 again this year. After hearing some of the players reflect on the season, I can't imagine the veterans brought in along with the core of the team would be okay coming up so short back-to-back seasons. Joey from Bellevue says, the Preds will finish in the bottom 10 again. You're saying they've never been a part of a rebuild. It's inevitable for them to rebuild, especially with the core being an older group.
They may come to that conclusion, about halfway through this season, and that could send him that way. That to me is what has been smart about Barry Trotz's proceedings, right? What he did last year backfired. It didn't work. But in doing all of those things that he did, the bold signings last year, what he's done to try to shape the roster this year and say what he talks about is a possible bounce back, he hasn't affected his farm system and his ability to stockpile a lot of picks. Now, what they do with those picks and how they develop those picks, they really do need somebody to surprisingly exceed the expectations that the Scott Wheelers and the Corey Pronmans and the other people that evaluate farm systems. They need somebody to jump in there for this to work and for them to be different than a lot of these teams that have to hit rock bottom year after year to really rebuild.
615-737-1025. So the data from Daily Faceoff shows that rebuilds do work, but the average length, 8.5 years. Would you be willing to wait that long if you were more likely than not to challenge for a championship once that's over? 615-737-1025. We'll wrap up the show next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan. Chase McCabe will join us in just a second. But first, let's go to Shay on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com. Shay, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. I really enjoy your show. I
Thank
get
you.
to listen to it every day while I sit in the car where my son practices. But as far as the rebuild goes, I'm a third-year season ticket holder, so I'm kind of new to this. And I understand these rebuilds can take a while. Based on your statistics, I didn't know it would take 8 years, but let's just say it does. I can tell you right now, my 12-year-old will not be in for that. However, to get my badge of honor to say I was there when the team's bad, it would take a lot from the Predators to convince us to stick around, like, locking in lower ticket prices, upgrading seats. And I don't know if they're willing to do that because Nashville's a different animal when you're dealing with Bridgestone. I don't know what other organizations have done. I would be willing to stick around because I know it's a process as long as that process works. But those are the type of things they would have to do to get a fan like us to stick around, especially driving 50 miles to come, watch a numerous amount of games. So I don't know what your thoughts on that, but they would have to really sweeten the pot. And I can tell you this year they didn't do it. They just basically said there's no price increase. I was like, okay, well, thank you very much considering how we did this past year. But so that's kind of where I am with it. I know my 12-year-old would not like that at all, but I'd be willing to stick around if they locked in ticket prices, upgraded seats, did things for the fans to try to at least make it entertaining. But Nashville and Bridgestone, they're kind of full of it sometimes. So I don't know if they're willing to do that to a rebuild. What are your thoughts?
Thank you for the call, Shay.
I think he's raising a really interesting question. Is if you intentionally enter into the rebuild, and let's just use the Sharks as an example. And the Sharks are struggling with their attendance right now. I can tell you that the games that the Predators played in San Jose were both very exciting games, but there was no crowd to speak of at either game. So their attendance has suffered. I don't know what each organization, once they sort of make this choice, does with their season ticket holders and prices. What do they do? I'm sure they have to get creative at some point because you can preach it, right? The GMs can say, hey, we are where we are. This is going to be tough. We're building the farm system. Here are our young players. That's marketable to some degree, but after a while, that's why I asked the question in Chicago, a huge market, right? That's had a lot of success, and they're still feeding off of that success, right? They're apt to be more patient because they won the 3 cups, right? San Jose might be a little different, a little more of a non-traditional market, a lot of successful teams, but never did win the cup, right? What do you do for that fan base? Because they're really struggling. Chicago, I think, has done a pretty good job of still getting people to come to their games, even though they've been awful the last few years. I guess people will come to see Bedard play for a while, even though he's young and they lose. They've been feeding off of that. These are all really good questions that are not part of this article, right? This only goes to your success on the ice. It's not the business side of it.
Let's bring in our fearless leader, Chase McCabe, live in Atlanta for SEC Media Days. Hello, Chase. How are you?
What's up, boys? How we doing?
We are doing quite well. I loved your interviews yesterday, all show long. I wanted to ask you about Diego Pavia. You had the opportunity to sit down with Pavia. You got to see him interact with others at SEC Media Days. You used the term rock star to describe the vibe of Diego Pavia. So what was it like to sit down with him and to see him interact with the world of the SEC yesterday in Atlanta?
I will tell you, we have a ton of interviews that we've recorded today, and every single person, as they came to our table, said, man, how about that Pavia? It's got to be fun covering him. I mean, he plays the part, and I think that's what Clark Lee wants him to play. Clark, told us, I want him to be him. And he is him. He is true to himself. He does not like to lose. He showed up, basically wearing a tuxedo and had his diamonds in his earrings, and just, look. And Willie, you know this. You've been around Vandy a long time. They've never had a guy like that. They've had good players, but they've never had someone that's going to command the room and steal the show like he did walking on Radio Row and doing all the interviews and everything that he did yesterday. And so I think that is huge for Vanderbilt. Obviously, they got to replicate and do even more than what they did last year. And I think they can. The problem is they play in a league that is just so tough. We just talked to Greg McElroy, who you will hear at 1:00 on our show today. And, one of the things he said was there's like 3 or 4 teams at the top, and then it's everybody else, and then maybe Mississippi State. But the key in that is Vandy's not that last team anymore. Vandy is very much in the mix, and Pavia has a lot to do with that.
Let me ask you this question, Willie, going off of Chase's point, because you are a Vanderbilt historian, a proud Commodore. How many Vanderbilt athletes can you recall that have had the stage presence of Diego Pavia?
In football, I would say probably none.
No.
I don't think there's been another guy like that. Jay Cutler was fairly charismatic, and he was
not like that though.
He was a pro prospect, but nothing like Pavia. Pavia, I think it remains to be seen if he can develop to a point where he becomes a pro prospect. He certainly has a belief that he's going to play in the NFL, that he's going to find a way to get in there. That's what makes him good. The thing about Vanderbilt, I think, to balance Pavia's bravado, you have Clark Lee that has made the point clear that the objective of the team is to make sure you're not complacent for 1 second. Because last year, and you're playing one of the toughest schedules in the country, ESPN has them the second toughest schedule in the nation. He said they went 4-4 in 1-score games last year, and they ended up 7-6. So he said, we're just as close to 2-10 if you don't win any of those games as you are 10-2 if you were to win all those games. I think that's one of the great things that they were able to do last year, is unlike the year before where they were blown out of basically every SEC game, that they were basically in every SEC game last year. So I think that's what I would think is in front of them. A lot of close game, a lot of games against teams that they're going to be underdogs against. And can Pavia come through in those games like he did last year? It's not a given, right? It's not a given. No. Regardless of how much bravado he has and how much better on paper their roster looks, they're returning a lot more production this year. They've been able to keep players that they weren't able to keep before. A lot of it is because of Pavia. And I think they've been able to attract players that weren't attracted to the program before. They had a bunch of nobodies. It was the dregs, right? Like, hey, I don't have anywhere else to go. Okay, I'll come to Vanderbilt. That's what they were dealing. That's what Pavia was, right? He wasn't getting his phone ringing from Kentucky and Auburn and Ohio State and Michigan. He came to Vanderbilt because it was a unique situation. They were bringing the coaching staff, and the coaching staff
that was key, though,
was saying, hey, you need to bring Diego Pavia. Just bring him over.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Beck and Jerry Kill coming on, and Coach Lee acknowledged that. I mean, that was key to the whole situation of getting Pavia on. So,
Chase, I want to ask you, yesterday, Diego Pavia had quite the audience for his news conference. I can only imagine what it's going to be like today when Arch Manning addresses reporters. We talked about this early in the show. I think the Arch Manning hype train has left the station. It's off the rails with other train metaphors you want to use. Is there a buzz in the room about Arch Manning talking today?
There is a buzz in the room, and it's interesting. Joe has brought it up with a lot of people that we've talked to, including Chuck Oliver, who does a syndicated show on college football and does radio here in Atlanta. And it's like, look, I get it, but he hadn't done a whole lot yet. And we say that about other quarterbacks that are coming in this year. The difference is their last name isn't Manning. And, I said if this was Arch Vingen or Arch Donick, we're not having this conversation. Archbishop. Well done. It's completely different. But because he's a third generation, he's Peyton and Eli's nephew, Cooper's son, Archie's grandson, he's going to get that hype. And now it's, can he, truly live up to it on the big stage? Adam, you'll appreciate this. There's a who's who of media from Texas here, including the world's strongest man, Mark Henry.
Of course.
Who does radio, I guess, in the Austin area now. He's here on Radio Row. We're going to try and get him on here in a little bit. But he's here to cover Arch and Steve Sarkisian. I mean, there's so much hype with Texas. And you ask people around here, they'll tell you Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and then maybe LSU are kind of the upper echelon, and then it's everybody else. So we'll see what Arch has to say later on.
And I want to say that Mark Henry's son plays in the SEC.
Oklahoma.
Okay.
And then he's signed a development deal with WWE as well.
Okay.
Chase, what do you think you've learned so far, and what do you think we will learn? Because he's a little bit of a mystery man. But Joey Aguilar, I'm curious what the coaching staff and the people there present him as. Do you think he is the starter, or they're going to couch and say, we don't know? How do you think they'll approach that? All the questions we're going to have, because he's a little bit of a mystery.
The sense that I have gotten is, yes, he is the starter. Coach Heupel is scheduled to join Joe and I a little bit later on. That'll probably happen during Jared's show. And we'll take that live and talk to Coach Heupel and kind of get more of a sense of that and see what he'll say at least. But everybody else kind of feels like that it is Joey Aguilar's team, but that he could fit Josh Heupel's offense the way that Josh Heupel wants him to. That's why they brought him in. The problem is he does have a tendency to turn the ball over, and that's something that if you look at quarterbacks that have played in this offense, whether it's Hendon Hooker or Joe Milton or Nico, they protected the football. And so that's something that he's going to have to do to keep that up tempo going in Josh Heupel's offense. But we'll certainly see. We have a packed show. Greg McElroy is going to join us, Commissioner Greg Sankey tomorrow at 12:45. So a lot of stuff coming from Atlanta.
We can't wait to hear it. A reminder that our SEC Media Days coverage is sponsored by Brewhouse South. Experience Nashville's ultimate sports and brew hangout at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs. Chase and Big Joe live from Atlanta. They will take it from here. Willie and I will be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. On behalf of Derek, be loved, love on your people. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Peace.